soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force. You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
We arrived in Urick and Gurrick, Scotland. That's on the first, I think, the first flight. There's like a passage waterway there. And we finally wound up in Aldermaston, England. It's just a town right outside of Reading, right. In fact, it was so close to London. We used to go to London practically 3 or 4 times a week. It was good duty, and we're there. And then there's where, and then right next to us, there was airfield where they assembled the CG-4s. They come in 5 big crates. Well, you can imagine crates about as high as this room.
8 times 10 feet.
And they were insulated with double layer of tar paper in between them to keep them waterproof. And these fellas there that were working on these gliders, assembling these gliders, they used those as a barracks.
Oh, the crates?
Yeah, the crates. They set them up, you know, because they were better and warmer than the Nissen hut. And so there we trained, and then we also trained on the Horsa. That's the British glider. And it was made mostly of plywood and covered with a fabric and dope, you know, to keep it rigid. And we trained there. We flew nights. We went out over the channel with big flights of gliders and just give the German radar a workout, I guess, you know. Then D-Day, or just before D-Day, they locked us down in the camp, the air base, and nobody could get on or off. And then on the night of the 5th, we all got big brushes and cans of white paint, and we had to paint the stripes on the gliders. Yeah, and they'd almost done the night before. And then the next day, I remember the morning of the 6th, our group dropped paratroopers. Then they came back, dropped gliders.
Steve Odahowski would pilot a Horsa glider for the 434th Troop Carrier Group, 71st Troop Carrier Squadron. His Horsa was identified as HS-129 and unofficially by the name painted on the nose of his glider, Chicago Kid, since Steve was from Chicago. On D-Day, Steve's Horsa would be in the 29th Serial, chalk number 13, in the Keokuk mission, bringing in additional troops in a Jeep. He was to land inside Landing Zone E, just outside of Hiesville, France, about 6 miles inland from Utah Beach.
Now, could you, when you guys are going over the channel at this point, can you see the ships and the boats below?
Oh yes, I saw the whole thing. Along the beach, I saw all the troops lined up along the beach. I seen that. I said, "Oh boy, this breeze, you know." So then all I was worried about was getting the glider down. I wasn't worried about, you know, shot.
How high were you guys up? I mean, how high were you above the?
We went across on the deck about 200 feet. And then we went up to about 500, and they brought us in, and we were supposed to make a 90, come right in. And so at 500 feet, you don't have much room to play around. And so we landed in this field. There were 7 of us that landed in this field. And I come down, hit the ground. I was on the ground, rolling, and there was a pretty good sized ditch. I'd say maybe 10 or 12 feet across and 8 feet deep. It was a drainage ditch. And I come there and I said, oh, God. So I tried to pull her up, you know, go over the ditch.
Get over it.
And I was going too slow, so I just sheared off the landing gear. And there's a skid on those things. So you could drop the landing gear on a horse and bring it in on a skid. But it takes longer to stop on a skid than on a wheel. We landed, and the 2 guys, those 2 guys that were in grave registration, I know that. And they were, see, this Horsa has got a big door on the left-hand side. And they got a little door in the back, I guess where they drop paratroopers.
Okay.
British did. So these guys had been in gliders before, you know, and they cracked up. So they didn't want that whole load on their back. So they said they want to ride in the back. I said, okay, be my guest. So the minute they stepped out, the Germans were in a tree line there, about maybe 100 feet. We heard a lot of rifle fire, and these guys got it right away. And then I thought, well, at first it was sporadic. At first I thought, oh, it's them guys that come in early in the morning, you know, the glider pilots, and they're giving us a reception, you know, kidding around.
Yeah.
Then I see guys drop. I said, no, they're not kidding. So we headed for a ditch, and we just got into the ditch. And Bill Jew, my co-pilot, he was moving so fast that when he fell into the ditch, and he was all wet. And so then the Germans came and put a Schmeiser in your face, you know, and rounded us up. There was about 15 of us, because we weren't carrying troops, we were just resupplied.
Yeah.
And we were marching back with our hands behind our necks. And a couple of SS guys pulled up in the Jeep, and they started berating these guards. And I asked one of the guys there, he was an interpreter, he could understand German. And I said, what's he saying? He says, shh. Then these guys took off. And what did he say? He said, why didn't you take care of them out there before you stripped them? So they put us on a bus, and were taking us to Paris. Well, luckily for us, not for the Army, but for us, it was overcast. Otherwise, we would have been blasted, because our fighters were shooting everything that moved. And we got to Paris, and of course in Paris, you know, the people would give you a victory sign, you know. Well, the Germans couldn't see it. We got on the train, we got to Frankfurt on Main, Germany, and that's where the interrogation center was. It was an installation where they had like cells. They were about this wide. There was a cot there, and about 5 or 6 feet high, real small. And they were walls that thick. They had insulation, Celotex. Insulation on the door was like a big refrigerator, you know, thick. You couldn't, you weren't supposed to contact the guy next to you.
So this is when you get to Frankfurt.
That's in Frankfurt, yeah. That's the interrogation center. It was called Dulag Luft. We finally got settled into the Dulag Luft, and I went for my first interrogation, and I went to this office, and a German major there with a monocle and boots, World War I. You can see he was old, you know.
Yeah.
So he handed me a sheet of paper with a red cross on the top. And on there is all the information that they want. They want what school I went to, what town I lived in, my family name, and everything. So I just put down name, rank, and serial number on the top, and handed it back, or laid it back on the desk there. And he looked at it and he says, "You didn't fill out the form." I says, "I'm sorry, that's all I can do." He says, "You're sorry?" He yelled, "Pustin," that's for guard. And the guard come in, you know, he's like, get out of here, you know. And made a big show of it. I went to Stalag Luft III. They assigned me to a room, not a room, but a barracks. And a little while later, a guy came up to me, one of the guys in there, and asked me, says, "You know anybody here?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I know. I see there's Bill, Jew, and Clayton Lau, and a couple other guys." Okay, so then he says, "Come with me." So they took me over to the colonel, and I remember him because he had his Achilles tendon torn. And he had a spring. He had a strap around here, and the thing on his shoe, I guess to let him walk, because he didn't have on his foot. And then he kind of asked me questions, and I told him what I knew, you know. I'd seen in the Paris railroad yards, I saw things that looked like gliders. They were like a body, and then it had a tail up high, and I didn't know what the hell it was. I thought they were some kind of glider or something. They were the bombs, you know, the V2s or the
V1, V2
used. See, they hadn't used those bombs until after D-Day. We lived on very poor food. It was cold all the time, no heat in the barracks. We had about 45 minutes on the stove. The Germans only give you so much coal. They come in those briquettes. And they only had so many of those. When it was gone, that was it. And you'd take turns on the stove. And when your time was up, you had to get it off. The other guy. Because what we did was mostly heat the stuff up. It was, we couldn't eat, they used to give us kohlrabies. You know what a kohlrabi is? Like a turnip. And they feed it to the cattle over there. It grows big, and it's got like wood in it. You can't eat the damn stuff, but they give it to us, you know. And they give us some cramped that you couldn't eat. And the only thing we ate was, only we could really eat was they give us the potatoes and a Red Cross parcel. And we're supposed to get a parcel a week per man, but it all depends how efficient our fighters were in shooting their convoys up.
Now those had the cigarettes and the bread.
Yeah, that was in the Red Cross parcels. Now, then near the end, after in Charlotte 45, I think it was, the Red Cross brought in white trucks with a big cross on the back. And these trucks, the prisoners drove them to the Swiss border. They loaded them with Red Cross food. And then the prisoners drove them back to the camps, different camps. Then at this camp, we made our own utensils, like dishes. We'd make dishes out of cocoa tins. And we took the can, they had a little can opener. It's got like a hinge on it.
Okay.
It's only about that big. And then you put it on the edge of the can and push it, pierce the can, and you go around like a regular can opener.
Oh, it just takes a little.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it would come in the Red Cross parcels. And we'd open these cans, then take a knife. We had these picnic tables. And you'd put the piece of tin down and take your knife and the crack and like a shear, and we cut these tins up. And we made a hammer out of a piece of tree limb.
Yeah.
And we take the tin and cut the strips of tin, lay them alongside the stove. We had a stove there where we weren't using it, and we'd pound it down, bend it, you know, make a, how you put tin together, sheet metal, and we pound these things in, pound them together and make our dishes. And we had them all the same size. See, because when the guys were cooking, there was 15 of us in my combine, in my room. And there's 2 guys doing the cooking, there's 13 eyes on them, see. When they got the stuff ready, they put the tins out on the table, and then the cooks put the portioned it all out. Then they took the cards, deck of cards, each guy got a card. They turned it over and the highest card got first choice. So you had to keep them honest. It was, the camp life was, we were pretty strict. We had a Colonel Spivey, was a senior Allied officer. He maintained discipline, and we had to stand Saturday inspections. We had to wash, be shaved. You couldn't go around with a beard, or you had to wash your clothes. And then January of '45, we could hear the Russian artillery. See, we were on the Polish border, and by that time the Russians had been across Poland, and they were fighting the Germans on German soil. So at 9 o'clock at night, we got the orders to move out, to hit the road. And I think there was thousands. There was 3 or 4 camps there, and there was, a couple thousand people in each camp. So we had to hit the road. Luckily, we went by the Red Cross warehouse, and they gave us a parcel to eat on the road. Well, that tided us over for there. So we walked the road, slept in barns, churches. We were going to a place called Sprimberg, and there we got on boxcars, which crowded us in like cattle. And then they took us to Mooseburg, Stalag 7A, and then they packed that. They brought in all the troops, all the prisoners from Germany, brought them down to southern, Germany, infested with lice and bugs, and yet every nationality under the sun. There was British troops next to us, Indians, and they don't eat meat. So we'd have a can of Spam, or they'd have a can of Spam, we had a can of salmon. We'd toss it over the fence, exchange. Honor system. It was April 14th, on a Saturday night. We heard a lot of activity in this camp, because it was a tremendous camp. All wires, compounds, and we could hear this tanks, because the Germans had tanks with metal tracks on them, and they made a lot of racket. So we could hear these tanks all night long. And in the morning, then we started sporadic fire, and we looked up, and there was no guards to the towers. So then a little while later, there was we could see a church in the town, church steeple, and it looked like it got hit by a shell. And then a little while later, you see the flag, American flag go up. And hey, boy, we were home. Then the tanks come through. Pat was there. He come in there with his pistol and all, and says, "I'll have you men out of here in 24 hours. Well, they were fighting a war, so it was about a week later before we got out of there. We got out. Yeah. They went to, from there we went to to Reims, and the Reims, I happened to get in, find out that my old outfit was stationed outside of town, and some of the guys come out of Jeep, and they got me, and we went back to the base. I got some money out of finance and some uniform, scrounged up, and we went to Paris on our Liberty run. So I had my first trip to Paris. Then we trip home on the boat, which was a breeze. We had about 250 enlisted men, and they had a place for them in the hold, and we had about 20 officers, and we stayed in the hospital section of the ship. Had a nice white Navy blankets,
Yeah.
had to sleep on all that crap. And they had these elevators and a refrigerator, and it was loaded with cold cuts and food and everything, cheese, sausage, everything. And you could go in there anytime. It was off the main, the dining room where the captain ate. And you could go in there and eat anytime, so that's what we did. And when you run out of something, you just blow on that tube. And some guy say, yeah, you tell them, well, we're out of meat. You set the plate down, up come a full one. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Well, now tell me about the medal.
A couple of weeks, about a month or so ago, we got a telephone call. They want to know if we could, if I could take a trip to Paris and pay with the government, French government. Yeah, so then they said, well, we'll send you the details. So then a couple of weeks later, they told us what to do. We had to be in Washington. So in Washington, we got on Air France, and they took us to France. They give us the red carpet treatment, all 100 of us, and our escorts, our wives. And they really kept us busy because they had a lot of things to do, and we didn't have much time. So we didn't get a hell of a lot of sleep, but we did have a lot of fun,
How was the French over there?
Those people couldn't do enough for you. We were all in our 80s,
Right.
And if you're going upstairs and you're staggering a little bit or something, you're grabbing, somebody's got a right to help you. You're carrying something, well, let me help you with that. That was it. And on the street, I noticed one thing is that little young girl about 16 or so, and I was on the street, and she came up to me and she says, were you in the last war, the big war? And I said, yeah. Shook my hand, thank you. Right.